I am privileged to be able to introduce to you Jody Bechtold. She is a highly regarded gambling addiction expert working extensively across the globe with individuals, organizations, and associations. She is the CEO of the Better Institute, a group practice located in Pittsburgh. She is also the co-author of the Gambling Disorder Treatment Handbook, a guide for mental health professionals, and 2 chapters in the Social Work Desk Reference, version 4, is it version 4? Yeah, version Good. 4. On gambling and gaming disorders, published in 2022. She serves as the Vice President of the Board for the International Gambling Counselor Certification. Jody holds a master's degree in social work from the University of Pittsburgh School of Social Work and has certifications as a board-approved clinical consultant, internationally certified gambling counselor level 2. When Jody isn't working, you can find her providing pet therapy with her dog Hannah and supporting her husband's business, Pittsburgh Guitars. Welcome, Jody.
Thank you. All right, thank you. So a couple of things. The hardest thing to do is to be right after lunch. The second hardest thing to do is be right before lunch, right? So I'm between you and food, so we'll see how this goes today, right? And hello to everybody that's virtual. Also, another disclaimer, I decided to go back to adolescents last week and get braces, so sorry I sound kind of funny when I talk. You'll get used to it probably faster than I am. Okay, so I've been asked to come and talk about treatment for gambling in kind of this new era, and I'm going to be sharing with you things that I have been working on and experiencing in my state of Pennsylvania that we can pretty much conclude is going to be in your path at some point with more of the expanded legalized gambling. So a lot of what I'll show, if it's not applicable today, use it to think about how you can be influencing with advocacy, shaping any of the legislation and things like that before it becomes operational in your state. And I'll talk a little bit more about some lessons learned. But this is going to be very clinical today, so we're going to do a lot of hands-on or discussing how to actually apply some of this with individuals with gambling disorders. I also know there's about a 10-second delay with everybody virtual. So a couple of things that I'm going to have people do. I'm purposely going to take a minute up here just to make sure everybody is caught up, okay? I will be showing 2 different things that are gambling focused, and it's not meant to trigger anyone. I will give you notice in advance before I show them. They'll only be for a few minutes, but if you need to get up and find that that's a good time to get something to drink or go to the restroom, I'll give you a heads up. And I'll also share information. I do my best to make it de-identified, but at the same time, if we can all just practice confidentiality for the sake of learning today. All right, so we already talked about that. The disclosure, if I talk about Gamban, I have a non-financial relationship with Gamban, which is blocking software, and so I tend to endorse them because I use them in my clinical practice. Many of the concepts that I discuss today have come from the book. The whole point of writing the book was to provide something from clinicians for clinicians that has kind of updated and become a little bit more relevant, not to take away from all the wonderful books that have been written in the past, because they're all on my bookshelf as well. But it was really kind of with the term gambling disorder and really looking at the expansion of legalized gambling, what are some of the things that are new? And so that's where this came from. So one thing you can do if you want to join my mailing list, this is part of the technology part of the day, is you can take out your phone and you can get your camera setting on and hover over the QR code. And that will quickly take you to my mailing list. I probably send out 12 emails a year, so trust me, I do not fill your inbox. But notice for those in real life in here today, can it work that far away with the QR code, right? And this is kind of some of the adaptation we're seeing as we come back to this hybrid model. For everybody virtually, it shouldn't be very difficult on your computer screen to do that. There's also, this slide is in the handouts. If you want to do that later, you can. Okay, so you still have your phones out, right? We are going to do something very interactive, so it involves everyone. So you have to get your phone in the room, and virtually. We're going to be doing something live. Okay, if you are virtual, you can use a QR code. If you're in the room, you can go to this website through your Chrome or Google web browser, menti.com. When you get to menti.com, you punch in this code. There are no spaces. They just do it for eyesight reasons on the screen. And we're going to wait because, again, there's going to be a little bit of a delay with virtual. What you can see down in the bottom right corner, these little hearts coming up, that's how many people are joining. Now, when you get there, it's just going to kind of pause because I haven't prompted you to answer the next question. But this tends to be really helpful, the questions I ask, to understand where everyone is with their knowledge on the topics I'm going to cover today. All right, anybody having trouble? I'll do my best to be tech support from the front of the room, right? All right, and I always call on a couple people. Robbie, is it working for you? All right, this is good. We're getting a lot of people joining. And once I move to the next slide, you'll see there'll be a question that you'll need to answer, and we'll see in real time everybody's answer. Okay. All right, Robbie, did you get it? Okay. Any other trouble before I move? All right. When I go to the next slide, it's also going to still have the code at the top of the screen. All right, let's see. Sorry, I'm looking for my mouse. There it is. Okay. All right, here's the question. I understand how generational characteristics impact my clinical practice. Yes or no? So everyone in the room and everyone virtually is able to answer this in real time. And so far, it looks like we have quite a few people that understand the different generations. All right? Okay, the results are still coming in, but for the majority of you, you understand how to incorporate generational characteristics in practice, and we'll give a couple of examples of that when we're working with individuals and family and loved ones. I use the GPQ assessment with some of my clients. And I purposely just use the acronym. Okay, so a couple of you are familiar with it. When we get to the different assessments, we're going to talk about when it might be helpful to use which assessments for which clients. All right, so definitely the group's going to learn more about the GPQ today. That's great. I recommend the use of recovery podcasts for some of my clients. This is great. This is what I want to see, a lot more yeses. We did this 2 years ago, 3 years ago, a lot more no's. So the word's getting out about the use of podcasts, particularly for gambling disorder. Great. these are fantastic results. I recommend books and audiobooks with some of my gambling clients. Perfect, so a lot more. I'd love to hear the books and the audiobooks that people are recommending when we get to that section. You know, let's share and see what everybody's using. But we'll talk about why we might want to recommend books and audiobooks when we get to that point in the presentation. Oh, that's just a blocking. I recommend block software for my gambling clients. Okay. Okay, perfect. So definitely incorporating more of the technology with some of the clients that we have is going to be really important for better outcomes. Okay, you guys are great, doing great. I help my clients create budgets and restitution plans. Fantastic. That's what I want to see, a lot of yeses. Great. I ask about video or internet gaming with some of my clients. And the catch here is make sure it's not just the young ones, right? Good. This is a good group. This is going to be fun. I don't mind being between you and your food at noon. All right? Okay. All right, so we're going to switch back over. All right, so you get an idea based on real-time feedback, kind of where everybody is that's attending today. And so we can't underscore this enough, that gambling is everywhere. So we want to have the perspective of the individuals coming to seek help, where they might have learned some of this, and you know, some of those maybe not so subtle messages. So here's an example inside a casino where you can see that's taking up a lot of real estate, isn't it? That's big. Right, so a lot going on depending on the person and why they want to gamble, the sensory reasons, but it also can have very much of a video game look to it, right, to be attracting the younger generation. Again, look at the real estate that is happening here. A lot, it's no longer just kind of watching one thing happening while gambling. It's multiple things, looking up, looking to the left, looking to the right, everything that's going on. We see them in grocery stores, right, depending on where we are working with clients. In my state, this version was moved to truck stops. So we have special rooms in truck stops just for gambling, right? Doesn't that sound exciting? This is a lottery kiosk at the Pittsburgh airport. So we have it at the airport. Very different than what we think of with Las Vegas gambling at the airport. But it's there all based on legislation, right? And so again, you want to think about how you can advocate and how you can inform legislation for your state before things just happen and then you have to learn about them. And go, oh, now how do I have to work with this, okay? And then, of course, we all know it's here or it's coming soon, right, to the smartphone near you. So here's what we have in Pennsylvania. And this was before the pandemic, right? We have the lottery and the scratch-offs. We have casinos, table games, roulette, sports betting. Before the pandemic, right? Before the pandemic, everything went online in Pennsylvania. Right? And so what I've noticed is really trying to tease out, and sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, was this because of the pandemic that we got so many more individuals that experienced gambling-related harms, or was it because everything went online? And the answer for me, clinically, not research-based, is yes and yes. You're going to have a group of people that really got caught up in the effects of the pandemic, with the boredom, or fearful of losing their job. And then you have other individuals that have known sports betting or fantasy sports at a very young age. They've grown up with it. Now they are of age and they are very technologically savvy, and the two together just made it very easy to do. Okay? So you can anticipate that we're going to have more of that in these various states. So think about it as it is being considered for your state and what that might mean. Now, the next slide is going to be gambling related again. So I want to show you, I took these two pictures. So on the left is obviously a slot machine, right? And on the right is a picture that I took at 9 in the morning on a Saturday morning at Dave and Buster's. When it wasn't open yet for business, I was there for a speaking event, and they ran out of room. And I was headed to the ladies' room, and I turned the corner, and I was like, what is this, right? So you can really see at a distance, what does this look like, right? You study it long enough, you see it's an arcade. But at quick glance, it really looks and feels like gambling, like that something magical is about to happen. So take into perspective, what are young individuals exposed to subliminally, right, in terms of gambling? And this is helping us to better understand what is going on in the family, right? What maybe is their history, that when they want to kind of ask the why, maybe some of this is what will be for their individual narrative. Okay, so again, this is what I want you to do. I'm going to show this twice because it's really quick. This is the top of a video of a slot machine. And I want you to watch and start to recognize everything that's happening. And then we'll kind of talk about it. All right, what did you see? And if anybody is virtual, put it in the chat and you can read them out. What did you see there? What did you hear? Say a little louder. Lots of stimulation to all senses, absolutely. What else? So I can't hear you, say again. Oh, I've got the power. So this song, okay, right? Hot Stuff is a famous song. Okay, so here's the question. When did Hot Stuff come out? In the 79, I think, something like that, right? So what generation is that? Right, start to think generational. And what does this wheel look like? Yep, Wheel of Fortune. Okay? Now, what about the little red devil? Very animated, right? Like a video game experience. And what did he do? I don't know if you saw it. Okay, lassoed. Okay, he got mad that he didn't like the number it fell on. He lassoed it and moved it to something more favorable, which makes you feel like you have more control of what's happening. Okay, now I'm going to play again and see what else you notice. Oops, sorry. right? So when did that little red devil come out? Before you Google it. The 50s. Yeah. So how many generations did this one casino game attract? Like all of them. Right? Something for everybody, some sense of connection. And I like to show this. It's not meant to trigger anyone. I like to show this because these are the casino games that are currently out there, right, with a lot going on. And so of all ages can pay attention to some or all of it and feel that that's my machine, right? And so being able to talk with people when they're in front of us about their experience when they're gambling is going to be really helpful. Asking those detailed questions. You don't have to know this. You have to know how to ask the questions. What is it that you like about it? Why do you identify with it? Did you have an early positive experience with this particular machine, right? And really get into why they're drawn to it. I took this video. They don't know I did this in the casino, right? But I was watching the number of people that were lined up to play this machine, right? So it's very popular because of everything going on. We want to understand that and understand our client's perspective when they're struggling to say, how did this all happen to me? What's the why? Okay. Okay. Now, this is a diagram that's, I just say it's going to be outdated tomorrow. It's hard to keep up on it. So this was the beginning of this year. But if you can see from the back of the room, this is all the states in the United States, and the darker color are the ones that have already legalized sports betting. Okay? What did we have in 2017? How many states had legal sports betting in 2017? You guys remember? 2. Right, so I'm using the key year 2017 because, right, 2018 is when the Supreme Court overturned the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act. That's really fun to say with new braces. All right, overturned that to allow each state to decide if they are going to do legalized sports betting. So it didn't just automatically say everyone's doing sports betting, it's to decide, okay? And then how to operationalize it could take up to another year after that. So I know Ohio's big conference in February is going to be really focused on sports betting because it's going to be new in Ohio, right? So really looking at all these different states. Have we seen expanded gambling at this pace ever before at a national level? No. Okay? And sports betting is something that the younger generation has already grown up knowing, doing. The fantasy sports, the daily fantasy, anything like that, just maybe not per se legalized gambling. And then as they move into adulthood, this is a natural rite of passage to begin to do this. So it's not yet official here in this state of Minnesota, sorry. Lot of letters for new braces. And you can really think about how to better advocate if it becomes legal, what else should come with that, right? Because the wave is pretty obvious. It's probably coming. Have a say in what you get when you get this, okay? But I think this is a very helpful diagram. And again, it'll be outdated, tomorrow, right? This is a website called Bovada. Is anybody familiar with Bovada? A couple people are, right? Ask your clients, especially the younger ones. They're already on it, right? Bovada is not necessarily the legal sports betting site. I've had people that have said, oh, Bovada, that's the one. That's the girlfriend I can't break up with. Okay? And we know with state programs of self-exclusion, it would not address this site. So we're going to talk about how to do this. So you do have clients already that are on sites like this, asking not are you, it's which ones. It's a form of questioning that they'll tell you more. Right? Okay, so again, sports betting, online sports betting, legal in Pennsylvania. I went to a hockey game pre-COVID, okay, pre-pandemic. And what you see on the left is the 50-50 raffle that supports the hockey team's foundation. Great. That's wonderful. And they accept your debit and credit card also. Okay? So no longer does somebody have to say, I have so much cash in my wallet. Where do I spend it? Food, beverage. Now I can spend it because it's plastic, and I can actually use my plastic for the chance at the 50-50. And then while I'm in my seat, now this picture on the right was taken right outside the concession stand area. And they have screens everywhere before they redid the arena to then have its own sports book, right? So this is everywhere, these screens, that is showing you all the teams that you can bet on, what the spread is, and what catches me is right on the left-hand side of that screen, it says, bet now from your seat. So there's your smartphone again, right? So we've got, cashless, we don't have to feel the pain of money, and we've got, I can watch a game and be betting on other games at the same time. And the younger generation can multitask with tech very well, so this is right in their comfort zone, okay? So be thinking about that, because most states that legalize sports betting, the online was at the same time, if not right behind it. So you kind of want to think about both of them, because if sports betting is only at the brick and mortar, then they're also on the Bovado side, or an equivalent of Bovado. All right? Okay, we're going to watch a clip of me being interviewed in Pittsburgh. Now, it was really fun for those here physically. I was on the plane last night coming in, and half the plane was filled with Steelers fans coming to Minneapolis after having been to the Steeler game in Pittsburgh on Sunday. Okay, so I show this and we're going to talk about what's already different. This was recorded in 2019, and you'll see so pay attention to all the things that they're referencing, okay? And this is on YouTube, so you could go back to it and watch it again.
Sports gambling has caught fire in Western PA as sports-savvy fans are now taking to the casinos and phone apps to make bets on games. There are thousands of potential bets available 24 hours a day.
But where some praise the ability to get to all of those bets and the tax dollars, others see danger. Andy Sheehan takes us inside this new world of gambling.
As the Steelers take the field on this recent Monday night, a different kind of game is already in full swing a few hundred yards away. At the Rivers Casino Sportsbook, it's not necessarily whether your team wins, it's whether they cover the spread. And the Steelers are 2-touchdown favorites.
I like the Steelers. I like them to cover.
It's a big spread tonight.
It is a big spread, but I think they'll be fine.
The firewall that once stood between pro sports and gambling has come down, and sports betting in Pennsylvania is becoming an inferno. In September, bettors wagered $194 million in the state, up 78% from the month before. Much of it here at the Rivers.
It really electrifies the center of the casino here because everyone has a couple dollars on the game, and it's a whole new way of watching it.
It's a whole new experience here at the Rivers, but as busy as this scene is, the real action in terms of numbers is on the phone. 3 of every 4 bets are placed electronically on one of the new sports gaming apps available for download on your phone. Literally thousands of potential wagers right in your hand 24 hours a day, including in-game wagering, allowing you to bet on just about anything that happens on the field.
Believe it or not, first downs or just whether 4th downs, if they go for it on 4th down, if it's 4th and 1, 4th and 2, take a real quick bet if I can.
Here we go, Steelers, here we go.
NFL rules prohibit teams from entering into sports betting related sponsorship, but that hasn't stopped wagering at the games themselves. Fans in the stands on their iPhones and Samsungs betting on what might happen next.
It definitely adds to the excitement a little bit, you know what I mean?
But to others, the easy access to all of these betting options sets off alarms.
All the in-game betting is what, to me, is so exponentially more dangerous. Because if you make a bet early on a particular game and you lose, then you have that much more time to keep betting to chase your losses.
The demographic for sports betting is young and male, guys in their 30s, 20s, and younger who can't handicap a horse or play blackjack, but believe they know which teams will win and cover on Sunday. Addiction counselor Jody Bechtold says she's already seeing some new young clients who've already developed a closet compulsion.
You think we'll see a whole new generation of gaming addicts here?
We will.
A problem that won't be seen under the mammoth flat-screen TVs and the betting kiosks.
You won't see the guy sitting at home who did it on his phone, is having a tantrum, throwing his phone against the wall.
But while the industry concedes that a small percentage, 2 to 3% of the population, will develop a gambling problem, Gary Rothstein of the website Penn Bets says those percentages hold true. And the home gamer is generally someone who will find an enhancement rather than an addiction.
Is going to be the kind of guy who would watch the Steelers anyway, and as long as he's watching them, if he puts 20 bucks on them to win or to cover the point spread or whatever, it's that much more fun for him and that's much more interesting.
Guys like Eric Gensler. Is this a slippery slope for people? Can it become a problem?
Oh, for sure, for sure. I definitely do the best I can to watch what I do, because if not, my wife would kill me.
And new gamblers can learn a painful lesson. It's a lot harder than just predicting who will win a game. You'll recall that the Steelers beat the Dolphins by 13 points. The point spread was 14. Meanwhile, the real winner here is the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the state's reaping profits that once went to your local bookie. Cash-strapped and facing deficits, it has a brand new stream of revenue that's growing by the day. Andy Sheehan, KDKA News.
Sports gambling.
All right, so what'd you get from that? And hopefully there's some chat. You can read any of the comments coming through. What things stood out from looking at that? Yes?
Well, I think one goes, okay, it's not only do you have all that gambling, you got the drinking that's associated with it, so you got the two kind of connected associations of the addiction going on.
Absolutely. You see, and I'll show other pictures, more and more of associating sports books and sports betting with alcohol consumption. Okay? A lot of men in the picture. Okay, go ahead. Okay, yep. Yeah, you can see the danger of having access on your mobile device, okay? I'm trying to repeat just for everybody virtually that can't hear what you guys are saying. It is so true, because think about sitting on your couch and telling your family member or loved one, oh, I'm just responding to texts at work. Oh, somebody's just bothering me. I'm just getting bombarded with emails. And what they're really doing is what's called in-game betting, right? And so think about that. You used to have to place your bet and then watch the whole game to see what would happen. But if after so long in the game you realize you're never going to win your bet, then you start betting in the game on different activities so that you can technically bet every single action second of the game, and then all 32 games at the same time. Now remember, people are already doing this on illegal websites. Okay? In the back. That's right.
And I'm thinking about, I watched the Vikings game Sunday, and I'm a sports enthusiast, but just how much, gambling involved, and just how much the emotions went up and down, and how much even more
Yeah, exactly. So for virtually what he's talking about is watching a particular game this weekend and the ups and the downs of the game and the excitement and the intensity and how that would feed into the in-game betting, right? And thinking that things are a sure bet, right? We've heard that phrase before and it really stands out even more now, right? Okay. One of the things that is already outdated about this is the prevention of the professional teams and the sponsorship of the gambling industry. That's already gone away, right? And so there's an even stronger association with gambling and with sports based on how they've done their sponsorship, okay? And you're going to see that. Think about if you have a teenager, and that's kind of their exposure. They think they go together. Right? So I'm going to show you another video of another example of that. We've got to remember that gambling is everywhere, and it's for people to then develop problems related to gambling, they're going to internalize it that it's something they did wrong. So we're still dealing with that intense shame that we don't see to the same level as when we look at substances, right? Because this is such a private thing, and you don't ingest anything first before you have this disorder behavior. And so with my caseload, pre-pandemic, people know me, so it was about 45% of my caseload at any given time was individuals with gambling disorders and or family members. During the pandemic, it went to 95%, and I'm still at 95%, okay? And I have several people in my practice that also are trained because we're finding it's really important to be able to help the family member. And then at some point, if there's family therapy that needs to happen and or if there's relationship counseling that needs to happen, all right? And then I'm going to be talking about this in Ohio in February, but with sports betting, you're going to get that younger, tends to be male individual that has the parent that comes along with that. And so how do you work with the parent with the launching into adulthood, letting go kind of thing, all wrapped up into gambling. So you're going to see, again, different ways that referrals are going to come in as we continue to see expansion of different types of gambling. Oh, okay, hold on.
24 hours a day.
All right. So this is taken from the hockey game. And I want you to pay attention to the sponsorship, okay?
National penalty number 8, 2-man high stick. And put your penguins on from Powerball to Powerplay.
Okay, so it's no longer a power play, it's the Powerball power play, right? And you can see it's so closely associated, and there's so many families, young kids that go to hockey games, that this is what they're learning when they're learning what is a power play. They're learning it's a Powerball power play, okay? So, just examples to help understand more about your client's worldview, where they started, by the time they come to see you, what are all the things that they might have, the messages that they might have gotten, okay? Sorry. Yeah, the stadiums are getting naming rights. That's where I said that wall is down now with like the DraftKings, not to pick on DraftKings, but just like DraftKings or FanDuel or something like that, where they're naming it. Where we saw that with beer before, right? Used to be ketchup where I came from. Yeah. Of course, the Captain Morgan's. You're right before the Powerball. I missed that. Thank you very much, right? I'm so focused on the gambling part of it that I miss all the other addictive substances, right? All right, and so again, you have the opportunity to really understand what's going on in legislation right now and shape that, advocate for it. You might not stop it from coming, but can you have a greater impact on the way that maybe self-exclusion is written? Right? There's a lot of loopholes in self-exclusion. You know, can we tighten those up? Is there a greater opportunity to offer through the helpline free blocking software? Can you get that somehow figured out, right? There's opportunities. So there's many states that haven't gotten it right. Learn from what they wish they could go back and do, and think about how to advocate better for your state. Right? And I know people virtually, if you're from a different state, same thing. And we have a lot to learn from everyone across the pond that's been dealing with this for so much longer than we have. And what they're talking about now, they're starting to get all the advertisements off of the sports uniforms, all the logo branding and things like that, all the sponsorship. Okay? Okay, so hopefully that kind of sets the stage a little bit for all these different generations and the attraction, the rite of passage. But now, what do you do when someone's in front of you and you're trying to better understand their gambling, right? So we'll go through a couple different instruments and screens. Again, I'm not going to endorse one over another. We're going to talk about when they might be more applicable for what settings or what situations. Obviously, the DSM-5 TR came out recently and did not really change anything to gambling disorder. Okay, so it was the same as in the DSM-5, referred to as gambling disorder. All right, and we're looking at that persistent and recurring problematic gambling behavior. So when you think of substance use disorder, and we remember abuse versus dependence, the way to think about gambling disorder is kind of more dependence. Are they already checking the box on 4 or more of the 9 criteria? And if they're not, then they're at risk and problematic, but they don't meet criteria for a diagnosis. Right? So this is another great opportunity with any expanded legalized gambling to make sure that the funding still addresses individuals that are at risk and problematic, and don't wait until they meet the full criteria. Also make sure you're addressing family, however family is defined. Okay? So we're looking at very similar characteristics with substance use disorders, that preoccupation, the tolerance, and the withdrawal. Tolerance does tend to be more about the money, okay? So even though adolescents will still gamble, we want to better understand what tolerance looks like for adolescents if it's not all money related, right? But here, rarely would someone ever place a $1,000 bet on a game the first time they're learning to sports bet. Right? So what was the bet when they first were sports betting to where it is the day that they're in front of you? No different with the machines. I don't know for the slot machines. I did recently find a machine that you could spend $12 a bet, okay, on a slot machine. Now, when you think about that, how many times can you hit that button in a minute? Okay? So these dollar amounts are getting pretty high, and the intricacy of the game, can you only win that Wheel of Fortune special thing if you max bet, but not if you don't max bet, and all of those things will help you to really tease out the tolerance of a particular person. And withdrawal is mostly an education criteria, helping people understand that being restless or irritable could be a withdrawal symptom when they're trying to cut down or stop. The escape, okay, trying to escape from problems and relieving a dysphoric mood. So we, in this room, the speaker before, I want to say Dr. Brown, was talking about boredom. Right? And that really rang true. We're going to look at how people are handling, boredom and the avoidance, right? Chasing, you're going to see that even more and more. You really want to understand the chasing, especially on anything online, because it is so quick and people can do it. Most of the stories I've heard is that someone was in such a dissociated state, they did not know how it was even possible to spend that much money in one evening, right? And so you merge those two with the hooked up to the credit card and super fast online, and people really lost track of what was happening. Question in the back?
I was just going to say, a lot of times I've seen people, they've dealt with supposedly their substance use disorder, but now the gambling becomes,
Yes.
because there's still some root causes that they're basically having the same symptoms that they had with their substance use disorder. Now it's transferred over to gaming or gambling.
Exactly. So, being able to really understand individuals that have a history of substance use disorder, maybe they're in recovery, and then gambling all of a sudden takes them and grabs them in that grist. I had a woman, she had 19 years of recovery for alcohol and had a very severe gambling problem. And it did not occur to her, or it was fascinating to me, how much the compartmentalization occurred with her 12-step program of AA, and not applying those concepts of recovery to gambling, right? And so again, lots of opportunity for education, public awareness, things like that. My favorite's the lying, right? We now finally have, yep, I know you're lying to me, and I can check that box now. But this is one that, sometimes they'll even lie when telling the truth is just as easy, because they're just not used to that full honesty way of living. Loss of control, we're going to really dive into that on an individual level to understand what loss of control looks like for that particular person with the type of gambling that they are doing, because that's going to help you with your treatment plans and your treatment intervention. Right? Understanding how they might have risked significant relationships. Again, educating people about the Americans with Disabilities Act does not protect for gambling the same way that it protects for alcohol and other substances. We need to make sure that sometimes people don't practice too much honesty at work about their gambling problem if they might not be protected by sharing that much. So as clinicians and prevention, all of that, we need to better inform people what are the best ways to talk about this in a work setting. And also recognizing the significant job issues. I see a lot of that with a new concept called gambling motivated crime. And so you're going to see individuals, when they've finally exhausted all access to any other source of funding, that they will, some individuals will commit what we call crimes of trust, and they will steal from family and employers, right? And eventually when they get caught, then they're in the court system, which gambling disorder is not part of sentencing guidelines. So you can just chase this downward spiral there. And bailout, right? Looking at all the ways that people have experienced and been given bailouts so that they can then return to gambling and what those look like. That's going to be a big one for your budgets and restitution plans. So you can't better explain it by a manic episode of bipolar, and you need to meet criteria of 4 or more of the 9 criteria. Now, I have been doing this quite a while, and a very, very, very few number of individuals that I've worked with that did meet criteria for bipolar and met criteria for gambling disorder. So be very careful not to just label both, right? Because in a gambling state of mind, they can look manic and they can look severely depressed depending on the outcome of the gambling that they were doing, okay? But at the same time, people can have bipolar. And the reason I say this now, and again, not research-based, only my experience so that you kind of think this through. More recently than not, I've been asking a lot more about medication and finding out that people are finally getting a diagnosis of bipolar. They've been struggling with getting the right kind of med for all this time. And then they experience a gambling problem, but they have a history of gambling. Let's be clear, they've gambled prior. And when they finally got on the medication for bipolar, they felt great with their bipolar, but their gambling got worse because they were prescribed Abilify. Okay, so Abilify does have an FDA warning. And for some individuals, the prescriber doesn't understand gambling, and it might be better that the prescriber finds something different from Abilify. Or you then start, if they need to stay on Abilify, you build the wall that protects them from themselves as much as possible when they still need that medication. So it gets a little tricky with the bipolar, and that's why working with a prescriber and really understanding this is going to be so helpful. Has anybody used the PGSI, the Problem Gambling Severity Index? Okay. I'm not sure if anybody in the chat is putting anything. So this is one way that you can have a conversation with your client to better discuss how severe their gambling might be. Okay, so it's severity. And then we're able to objectively talk about it as opposed to only maybe talk about how much money was wagered as a indicator of severity. Okay, it's one that came out of Canada. It's very easy to use with clients. They can even answer the questions themselves. So this might, depending on the person, if they're really trying to understand how bad is it, right? Let's do the Problem Gambling Severity Index and see what you score, and let's talk about that. So all of these are for psychoeducation with clients. Now, the pathways model. So this, I remember learning this. I remember trying to employ this in practice when I was new to the field, and I fumbled a little bit, and I kept at it and saying, I've got to better understand this. So the pathways model talks about 3 different subtypes of individuals. They can be behaviorally conditioned, they can be psychologically vulnerable, or they can be antisocial impulsive. Okay, now this is helpful when you're thinking about treatment planning and your interventions. When you're not quite sure what's going on with someone, that you might decide to talk about the pathways model, and then what we talk about is do the GPQ. So we'll get to that next. But this actually helps you when you think about it. If somebody's behaviorally conditioned, that's going to be a different treatment intervention than if someone's psychologically vulnerable and that's coming from trauma, right? So we have one direction of behavior and CBT potentially versus trauma informed, and starting with the trauma. And then the antisocial, that can be perceived or interpreted with the criminal behavior, but the impulsivity could also be trying to figure out ADHD. Which came first? Did they happen together? Does somebody say they have ADHD, but it's all because of their gambling? Do they have ADHD and then gambling happened later for them, right? And being able to understand kind of which came first, or how do I, talk about this with a potential prescriber and approach this. So you can see that the interventions can be very different, even though you're treating what's considered the same disorder. But no matter what, for all 3 of them, this model talks about sharing these same things, the access and availability to gambling. So now you understand if we give more access and availability, right? More and more. That classic and operative conditioning, right? What were the early experiences? What were the rewards? The reinforcement, anything like that. That habituation, creating a habit of gambling, and the chasing. So you're still going to see these 4 the same, and then it's going to deviate based on what pathway. So again, pathway 1, I'm not going to go into too much detail just to make sure we have time. You can look at these, but you're really thinking about more of that behaviorally conditioned linked to the environment, not really the pre-existing pathology. Pathway 2, you're definitely going to be wanting to understand any type of trauma and what would make someone psychologically more vulnerable and the need to escape or see gambling as a solution, okay? And pathway 3, again, predisposing biological factors that can contribute. When we think of ADHD and the neural, that's a biological factor to take into consideration, and how those impact with some neurological deficits. But you then would do what's called the Gambling Pathways Questionnaire. All right, anybody done the GPQ? Thank you, Dr. Chapman. Right? Okay, so I helped Dr. Nauer and her team, and I was giving, when she was doing this research, this was going in front of some of my clients, and they really struggled to complete the whole thing. So one of the takeaways was it was too long, okay? And I have to tell you, I'm booked all day, every day. Many of us are. This is a longer assessment. You really want to decide when this is going to be most clinically useful for you and your client. I'm not going to say you do it with every single client at intake. It could negatively impact your therapeutic alliance if you're just hammering them with a bunch of questions before they know you, okay? So these are some of the questions, right? Things like, I gamble mainly to relieve tension or to blow off steam. And then we go down to number 6. If I want sex, I'm willing to pay for it. Okay, because this is getting at all the different pathways and understanding pathway 3 with the impulsivity and the antisocial. So going through all of these is really helpful, because that is going to also reveal more information that is going to be helpful for you working with your client, okay? But notice from 1 to 6, some clients are going to struggle. What's a 4 compared to a 3, right? And so there's enough questions also to kind of work through that. But the scoring itself is problematic, right? Again, how much time do you have before the next client when you're doing this? And this is a screenshot of just some of the scoring. And I've talked to Dr. Nauer, and I've make this automated. People will use it if it's automated, right? Because you have to go back to every question, and then you have to sum it up, and then you have to say, if it was this score, then it's pathway 1, but if it's not, then it meets pathway 2, but if it's not those, it meets pathway 3. Welcome to grad school again, right? Now, I say all of that because when I do supervision, people will present a case, and I'll say, this is a great example that you might want to do the GPQ, because it sounds like you think it's psychologically vulnerable, but you haven't ruled out behavioral. It sounds like you think it's because they have a criminal background, and you're going at it that direction, but what if it, right? And so using the GPQ to really hone in on particular individual pathways is going to then determine the treatment focus. I also use this when I do forensic reports for court. So it's clinically valid, right? And I want to rule out pathway 3. Why did somebody steal, right, from the employer? Is it pathway 3 with the antisocial and impulsivity? Is it trauma? Is it behaviorally conditioned? And so it's very helpful for me in that situation also. Again, not all of these would you use every single time, okay? My co-author of my book did the gambling functional assessment, and it's funny for those of us who remember DSM-IV and the GAF, which was Axis 5. I keep referencing this as the GAF, but it's not, it's the GFA, right? This one is another short one that is getting you to be able to identify what is it that people are getting while they're actively or in the moment gambling. Are they doing it for sensory? Are they doing it for escape? Are they doing it for attention or for something tangible? Now think about being able to tailor your treatment plan to understand that based on the type of gambling that someone is doing. So again, not to use with everyone, but really helpful for some individuals that keep chasing the why. Why do I do this? Why did I do that? Giving them more explanation to then be able to work on cutting down or stopping gambling. And then, because I'm a clinician and not a researcher, you want to know some of the best questions that have worked for me? Open-ended questions. okay? Being able to just have a conversation before we start scoring up and, you know, tallying results has been very helpful. And this is not research-based at all. This is not validated in any way. But I was on a research project with what we would call the dually eligible, Medicare, Medicaid. And they had congestive heart failure, and they were oftentimes mostly homebound. And we did a research study where we gave them an iPad with unlimited data back in 2013, right? That's almost 10 years ago. And they could use the iPad for whatever they wanted as long as they did these medical check-ins every morning for their heart failure. And what we found was about over half were always on gambling sites, okay? But what was also interesting is that we were doing these, you know, the screens, and we were doing, you know, the G-Bird or whatever, and they were all saying, nope, 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 to any type of gambling behavior whatsoever. And then we were like, what do you like to do for fun? And they're like, play on my iPad casino games. How do you celebrate your birthday? The buffet at the casino, right? Or something else. I would say, well, what do you do when you're trying to unwind? Oh, I go to the local VFW and play the cherry machines. And I'm like, what? And they're like, I'm drinking Diet Pepsi because of my diabetes. And they're all proud of their diabetes choice, but they're gambling, right? And then we look back at the original questions we had asked, and they had all said no to gambling. So we have to remember that they might not even think playing the lottery is gambling, right? So if we're asking, I used to say, do you play the lottery? They go, nope. Or I say, do you gamble? Nope. Do you play the lottery? Every day, right? So what's their perspective? What's their view? Just ask some fun questions. Ask some open-ended questions. Check out the ringtone on their phone, right? Is it the sound of a slot machine? Is it the Monday night, dun, 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 right? What is the ringtone? And then in our book, I put from being trained over the years of other researchers and what they've used. A lot of this came from Laudisor and LaChance about if you're in private practice or you're kind of the sole person in the clinic right now that's learning gambling disorder, what paperwork do you have, right? What paperwork do you use to ask all these questions? So this is just an example of where to start and to kind of use it as a guide and then grow from there so that we don't just keep adding a bunch of other assessments on top of what we're already doing. Really think about when you're working with someone that's problematic or gambling disorder, how are they met with? Are they met with the paperwork or the questions that really meet their disorder? And they're like, okay, you do understand this, right? They've really got to feel that connection with you. And the window is that's open is very short for the time that it's open. All right, so we talk about 3 areas of focus, okay? And this can change depending on the type of gambling that someone does, but I really do find that when I focus overall with my treatment plan on time, access to gambling, access to money, and I stay focused on those 3 early in the therapeutic relationship, people start to really understand how they can make a change related to their gambling behavior. Again, this can also work with harm reduction, right? So it'll work for harm reduction and for total abstinence. So time is the first one. If you're on your smartphone placing those bets, placing bets on 32 games that 31 of them you could care less about, how much time are you spending, right? And now we've got to replace that time if you choose not to gamble, or harm reduction, you're only going to be following one team. How do we fill your time? Getting people to solve this is so important. Part of gambling was to avoid problems, right? So part of recovery is active problem solving, right? So dealing with boredom, right? Anybody relate to this with clients having to deal with boredom, right? Where they kind of have, they're like, so what's the menu of options you're going to present to me? And I'm going to go, no, no, Maybe, right? You want to really be careful and say, you have to solve this. This is something you're going to have to solve the rest of your life. Let's get started now. What does that need to look like? Depending on the type of gambling and depending on the generation, helping them problem solve this could look very different. So, podcasts, right? Many of you said that you recommend podcasts. 5 years ago, we did not have one podcast related to gambling recovery, right? So this is fairly new. So I want you to pull out your phones and I want you to go to Google and I want you to type in gambling recovery podcasts. And let's see what you come up with. And do we have any comments or anything from the chat? We doing okay? Okay. So this is something I will have a client do while they're sitting in front of me. All right? They're playing with their phone anyways. Let's get that phone to some good use, right? Okay, so what are some things that you found when you Googled that? What came up? 20 bets? Oh, yeah, the article, the 20 best gambling addiction podcast, right? Okay, what else? Hello, my name is Craig. Good. You should see something like All In, the Addicted Gamblers podcast. Good. Broke Girl Society. People, we couldn't do this 5 years ago. This is amazing. Okay. Now, younger generation has always known podcasts. They're very familiar with them, very comfortable. What podcasts have they been listening to before they came to see you? All the sports-related ones, all the ones to be a better gambler, right? So now we're just going to switch what podcasts they were listening to and encourage them to listen to these podcasts instead. So maybe part of your assessment is to ask, what podcasts have you been listening to that are gambling related before you came to see me, because that'll help you, right, switch over to ones that are in recovery. You have to listen to some episodes. You can't not before you recommend. It's really important that you've worn the shoes before you're recommending to others. You know, some have a lot of episodes. Some have maybe only 6 or 8 a year, and that's okay. You want to get your clients to go in and kind of pick and choose what they like. But once you've listened to them first, or just a couple, then you're able to give suggestions and or homework. What I'd like you to do is listen to 2 different episodes and come back and tell me what you thought. So you're not saying, oh my gosh, All In is great, you're going to love it. You're saying, pick 2 episodes and come back and tell me what you thought. That allows them to still have kind of control in what's going on. The Broke Girl Society, I will tell you, is mostly focused for female. Yay, right? However, there's some episodes in there that have men as well. So I will tell some people, some of my female clients, go listen to 2 different episodes of Broke Girl Society and come back and tell me what you thought. And most of the time they will come back and say, they say everything I'm feeling. It's totally validating. I feel like I'm heard, that I'm seen, that I'm understood, right? And we know how important that is when people are asking for help to get that kind of validation. So this is just a quick screenshot of all the ones that are out there, right? So making sure you can recommend that. So how many, show of hands in here, have been using any of these with clients thus far? Okay, Craig. Okay, just a couple. All right, great. I encourage you to explore this because one of the things that I found also equally helpful with All In Addicted Gamblers podcast, again, they have lots and lots of episodes. There are some episodes that are tagged meetings, and they have recorded people having a meeting. okay? Now, we're not going to say it's GA, we're going to say it's GA-like or something like that, but it's people very similar, but it's all virtual, and they know they're being recorded, they agreed to be recorded. So I would recommend this to clients, especially the younger ones, that I want them to, it's easier for them to listen to a podcast about a meeting than their first thing is, go to GA, go drive yourself on a Thursday night at 7 p.m. and go to a GA meeting. They'll say yes, and then they won't go. Okay, but if you say, I want you to listen to an episode, think about it. It's on demand, it's on your time. It's not live, you don't have to have camera on, you don't have to speak, you can just listen. When you have individuals do that first as that first step towards, right, you're going to get more of an engagement. You're going to get more of a follow through. You're going to have them have a dialogue with you, what they liked, what they didn't like. So, you know, any type of podcast with the younger generation, especially meetings, is a great way to get them to realize they're not alone and their story is also not unique, right? Okay. YouTube, right? Again, if they've been on technology for gambling, they're going to still be on technology. How about if we steer them in a different direction while they are using technology? Now, some people we're going to be doing harm reduction with getting them off technology, but when they're on it, we still want to help steer them to where they go. You have to, with this first one, make sure you type the word the. The bet-free life. Okay, and what this does is it brings up a YouTube channel of a combination of All In Addicted Gamblers podcast and the Broke Girl Society podcast with Christina and Brian doing video shows, talking with different people, talking about themselves, and you know it's very very relatable to have two people in recovery discussing a topic. So it's another example of steering people where to go. There's lots of different TED Talks to get people to watch and identify with. Anything to help them make the association and the connections with what's happening with gambling and gambling disorders and what's happening with themselves. And then Nuggets is a classic. I don't know if you guys have seen Nuggets. It's a animated video for chemical addiction. And I show it to family members and individuals with gambling disorders, and they go, oh, that's so perfectly put in animation for me, right? And what it does is it starts out all light, bright, and cheery, and by the end it gets very, very dark. And it's super helpful to show how it just becomes this chore and this thing they can't get away from. And it's a great way to have a discussion when you invite a family member and you're trying to help them understand what addiction is like for their loved one, okay? Just examples, but trying to get you to think, how do you keep this younger generation showing up session after session, and you've got applicable things, right, to help them. Different websites and blogs too. Again, these could be outdated tomorrow because it's all technology. All right, so sometimes even giving your clients homework to say, go and find a blog that really speaks to you about gambling. Okay. End Gambling Harm is also part of Brian Hatch, and he's got all kinds of resources. It's very first-person recovery, so that also might make it more relatable for a client to find some things that they find valuable. All right, and then the Substack, this Jack Manfred, never met the person. He wrote daily for, I think, an entire year, his first year of recovery from gambling and what it was like. So very first person in a blog, right? Okay. Now, the role of GA has also been something of topic and of discussion, right? When we think of GA, right, 12-step meeting, the whole bit, it depends on where you are, so you have to really think of where you're practicing and what's the nearest GA meetings and understand more of the composition of those meetings. What I found near me was that when I had younger men in their mid-20s go to a GA meeting, they didn't go back. They didn't go back because they didn't feel like they fit in, because there weren't other middle 20-year-old people in those meetings, okay? They would come back and they would say things like, so humbled that somebody has 30 years in recovery, but they've never placed a bet on a smartphone before. How can they help me? Okay, well, we could combat that, but there is some truth to that as well, right? And so there is more of a movement within GA meetings to say, how do we, be more relatable and retain this next generation that's coming in. So I put this here because every meeting is different, right? You almost need to go to meetings near you, introduce yourself, and understand what kind of the composition is, the meeting makeup is, before you recommend somebody to go, and then they start to say, no, I don't think that's right for me, and that's your only solution. No, you got to go to GA. GA's, you got to go, right? Really kind of ease them into the idea of it for this younger generation. And it's on a scheduled day, a scheduled time. You have to drive. You have to get transportation. Some of those things don't speak to that younger generation either, right? Luckily, though, if you go to the GA website, there's a whole section for virtual meetings. And that's another way to encourage people to attend GA, maybe even for the first time. I've also had people that have chosen to choose a meeting out of state because that was their issue of anonymity. Great. Let's do it, right? Go to California if you want, right? And there's one out of Florida that people are talking about. I haven't experienced it myself. That is daily out of Boca Raton, but it's a virtual meeting. So there's an opportunity to say to people, there is a meeting for you every day because of the virtual solution, right? Online recovery, right, support meetings. They're different than GA or Gam-Anon. There's some that, will look very similar to GA, have that 12-step feel to it, but they, for obvious reasons, can't call themselves a GA meeting. And so those also are popping up. There's quite a few of those that have been around. So you just want to say, yeah, sure, try it. That's great. Let's look online if that's where you want to go. Are they effective? Same thing as, with 12-step, based on the research, sometimes we don't have a lot of research to support that. But you have to help them learn how to get invited and then what it looks like to attend. Again, with the tech-savvy generation, it's not going to take very long for them to figure that out or understand it. The pros and the cons, you've got to know your timing of this. If you give too many things people are supposed to do when you first meet them, they're going to be overwhelmed. So what's the timing of all of this? It just takes practice to find the right song to dance to with that particular client where you're not stepping on each other's toes, okay? And when to talk about it. Now, I had a woman who started to go to a Facebook closed meeting because her spouse had an addiction. And this was her way of being able to still get help and support without the family member knowing where she was driving to, right? And so this is another example of why you might recommend something online because then the person doesn't have to tell anybody where they're going or make up a reason why they're not there. These are all potentially first steps before that in-person or in real life what they're ready for. All right, and we talked about audiobooks, the new bibliotherapy. Again, younger generation likes audiobooks, right? So if we hand them our trusted book from our bookshelf, right, to read, sometimes that just doesn't go over very well. Get them to be thinking about different audiobooks. And many of you said that you already recommend. Think about the ones that are recovery related. Is there an audio version of that? Give people the homework to come back and say what ones did they find on Audible, or you guys are familiar with the Libby app. Libby app is through the libraries, and so people can get books and audiobooks for free through their Libby app of their local library. So that's how you get around the cost. When we also talk about those three areas, we talk about access, right? So as you better understand the online world, you're going to want to understand what are the limit settings within a particular site. So Bovada has a couple different ones. What's the cool off look like? Is it up to 30 days? And is there even an option for self-exclusion? So you want to become much more familiar. And again, this is a great place for advocacy before legislation is finalized about what this needs to look like if anything goes online, right? Because there's in-app settings and then there's the overall self-exclusion, right? Self-exclusion in the brick and mortar, and then what is that going to look like in the online space? Now, for illegal websites, there is no self-exclusion, right? Because they don't have to be mandated in any way. And so there's ways around that, and I can share that if you want to understand that later, right? But this is where then, what about illegal gambling sites? Instead of understanding every single website or site that they go to, just help install blocking software. And the blocking software will then block them access on their devices from these gambling sites. And I got an email from a family member one time that said, my husband has a terrible gambling problem. He's on illegal websites. Would you please send me the list of all of those sites so that I can take him off, right? And you totally appreciate how, where she was at. But illegal sites are popping up every day, right? So by having blocking software, it's a great way for people to say to their family member, look at the steps I've taken, okay? Gamban is very clear about it's difficult to get around it, but it's not impossible. There is no software at all that's one silver bullet. So do not sell this to your family members as saying just install Gamban and everything will be fine, because it will not, right? This is one of many things to be doing. And then last, my favorite topic about money. It's supposed to hurt when you spend it. Think about it. Give me $20 out of your wallet. You're going to be like, what? If you just had to charge it, you're like, okay, yep. All right, money's supposed to hurt when you spend it. So we really want to look at finances early and often when we're treating this disorder. It's critical that we do that. Understanding that meaning of money. So this is an old but good thing. There's real money and there's gambling money. And I was like, what? There's just money. Nope. To an individual with gambling disorder, there's real money and there's gambling money. And our job is to bring those back together and say it's money. And let's improve your relationship with money and improve your financial literacy skills, okay? Because they're viewing gambling money as more important. They can hide it and it'll be used to get themselves out of debt. It's their solution. And so we've got to be addressing that distorted belief about money early and often. Okay, so when I do budgets and restitution plans, how many of you have done the paper and pencil? Here's a budget form, blank form, fill it out, right? When you move to this younger generation, even Excel is slow. You need to be thinking about Google Sheets, okay? Google Sheets is a great way to have in real time them doing their budget and you pulling it up during the session and looking at it. Then you don't get I forgot to email you my latest version of this spreadsheet. You can just pull it up at any time. And again, I can talk at lunch more about this. If you have a BAA signed with Google, then you can have things and it's not violating confidentiality. In my Google library, I probably have 100 that are named, TS budget or something like that. Like they all have their initials in the word budget. I'm like, okay, I got to figure out which one to pull up for which session, right? But it's super, super helpful. And then it's in real time, and then they can choose to add a family member to look at that budget right away. TrueLink is a fantastic card if you're not familiar with it, especially for substance use, but also for gambling. And it's a prepaid Visa card. I encourage you to go to the website and request a demo. They will tell you a lot more about it, but it's blocking software. It's a way of blocking certain transactions, okay? And we have to attend to the emotional aspect of dealing with money, right? If money's supposed to hurt when you spend it, there's some emotional piece we want to be attending to. When I was early in my career, I didn't attend to this enough. Now I'm able to kind of hit pause after we do a budget and let people kind of absorb the fact that they finally put everything on one screen for the first time in a very long time. They've been avoiding having to look at the financial situation in entirety for quite some time. So we want to give pause to that. Don't forget the virtual apps, right? These are fascinating what they can do because you can now use crypto with PayPal without having to do anything. I don't know if you guys knew that. This is, and another one that might be coming to your state is gift cards for gambling. Okay, I went to my local grocery store and look what I found. You can buy them up to $400. I don't know any gift card that's ever had $400 on it. All right, and what do you see here? Scratch offs next to the ATM. And next to the Bitcoin machine. You convert your ATM money right into Bitcoin, and now you're virtual, and now you're gambling with crypto without your loved one knowing it. Right? These are the ones in Minnesota. That's what it looks like in Minnesota. These are all on Google. You can find these on Google. It's almost everyone I found across all the states I do this. There's a Monster of some sort of energy drink, there's a crypto, and there's an ATM. And probably a scratch off of some sort, okay? Many people ask me, fantasy sports, what's the harm? Can I do that even though I'm not gambling with anything else, right? Instead of us saying, no, you can't, blah, 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 I just ask the question, what if you win? Did you really want to let the tiger out of the cage? And kind of let them sit with that for a minute, okay? All right, I know we're getting really close. 1 minute. All right, I'm going to go fast for a minute. There's a lot of convergence with gambling and gaming. And you can see it's no different than what we had experienced before with substance use and gambling. Okay, so we're seeing that with gaming. The average age of a person gaming is in their 30s, not teenagers alone. So that's why my question was, if you're not, are you asking about internet or video gaming? Please do. I'm finding that people with time, no longer gambling, are gaming. Not necessarily a healthy choice, and there's such a convergence that you can gamble inside of gaming, and so they're really not getting away from it, okay? And that's a whole other talk, right? When you see these screenshots of the scratch off, but it's about Pac-Man, what generation are they going after, okay? The luck versus the skill. This is fascinating with the social casinos because they have totally disrupted everything online with how much money they made, going from old ways to new ways and getting a younger generation. So fantastic article on this. And the loot boxes. Okay, what do you see here? A bunch of people in an arena watching other people play video games. Oh wait, didn't we just talk about sports where there's a bunch of people in an arena watching athletes play a football game? It's no different. It just is different maybe to us. Okay, here's another example. And in the body, you can see people are wearing jerseys of their favorite esports team. I know your heads are exploding right now, right? And there's a lot of gambling on esports teams, okay? Betting on all of that. So I'm going to go really fast because I know we're out of time. The last two slides. The NBA 2K is video gaming, doing a draft like the NBA of young people to get them more familiar with the NBA sports. So they're trying to say, for the first time ever, this young generation is more into video games than physical sports. How do we get them back into talking about physical sports at some point? You can feel the rite of passage, the grooming that's happening by the time someone then turns of legal age to gamble. And Ninja is a famous gamer, and the NFL hired him to be a figure for it. Look at those kids loving a selfie with Ninja, right? That's just the next thing that's about to happen to move over into gambling. So this convergence of gaming and gambling is so here and now already. All right? And that's it. How'd we do? Did you learn a lot? Okay, wonderful. You guys are a great audience. Thank you so much. I don't think we have time for questions, but please see me at lunch, okay?